Hello and welcome to Good Conversations. We're honored to have with us again today Superintendent Cartwright of Glacier National Park, the 25th superintendent of the park's history of the last 102 years. Chaz started his superintendency in 2008 and oversees one of the crown jewels of Montana and indeed of the national park system as a whole. Indeed, the park is one of the few parks to be declared an international biosphere reserve. So important are its ecological and cultural resources. Chaz, thanks again for joining us.
You bet.
Well, last time we talked a bit about both the wonderful assets of the park, some of the challenges it's facing, and that you and other administrators and staff people at the park are trying to address. We touched on a number of things, including invasive species and climate change. Another big thing that the park has been engaging with, and that you and I both have on the Flathead Basin Commission, are the transboundary issues, as they're called. When people hear the term transboundary issues, what is that talking about?
Well, really, it's talking about this landscape that really knows no boundaries. It does not recognize the border between the U.S. and Canada. It's this larger system. And we have had some great successes in recent years and continued challenges in trying to protect this larger landscape.
And we're talking the North Fork of the Flathead River primarily.
The North Fork would be the big success story, because British Columbia decided, after years of discussions about a range of different mining proposals, that they were going to take mining off the table in the North Fork that heads up in British Columbia. So no mining.
And flows across the border all on the west side of the park.
Forms our western boundary.
And for viewers in our area here on the reservation, it's worth noting that one of the concerns was that any pollutants from mining that might have gotten into the North Fork would have reached Flathead Lake in 48 hours or less. That
is true.
Yeah. So that's off the table now.
That's off the table, and I think it's important now that that deal is almost done. There's still an issue of repaying exploration cost, but that's almost done, of recognizing what a big deal that is. I've spent my career working for the Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and now the Park Service, and thinking about British Columbia that had a final plan for management of their provincial lands that included mining, and the fact that they would take that off the table. It's an amazing thing they did. Both countries are going to benefit in huge ways from that, but I just want to say to the governor of the state of Montana, to the former premier of British Columbia, my hats are off to you, and it's a great thing that was done. I think one of those lifetime things that happens that truly a triumph for the crown of the continent and for Glacier National Park.
Yeah, we should all be sending letters to those guys thanking them for this. What a relief. In fact, it was the primary reason for the creation of the Flathead Basin Commission, wasn't it?
That is a true statement. And I don't think those transboundary issues will ever go away, because if we're going to preserve and protect the landscape, it's going to involve managers working well together, scientists working well together, cooperating across that boundary. That's the only way that things are going to work out. And the benefit of the memorandum of understanding that was finalized between the governor and the premier is it talks about moving forward, now that we're past the mining issue, on that higher level of cooperation in overall land management.
So, given that mining's off the table, what do you see as the greatest challenge at this point with the transboundary stuff?
You know, I think that the same old issues come up. Aquatic invasive species is something that we recognize if we're not all working on that could turn into a problem. They had an incident recently in British Columbia that I think that highlighted the possibility that something bad could happen, and it's really engaging everybody in looking at implementing on the ground a program to make sure that that doesn't happen.
What was the incident? What happened?
Well, it was one of the scary situations with the boat putting on the water, and we've had some close calls here in Montana that we've got boats that are coming from throughout the country, Midwest, down in the Southwest, that we've got to make sure that before they put on any of the waters in this entire area that they've been inspected, because those states have some very high levels of infestation. And
this is of the zebra and quagga mussels. For those who didn't see the first program, these are these tiny mussels that multiply by the gazillions, to use a strictly scientific mathematical term, and coat shorelines, boats, docks.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. They totally change systems. They kill them, and that biodiversity that we're so known for disappears.
So this incident in British Columbia, there was a boat that was putting on the water. Had it come from an infected place? Was it?
It had, and again, I think it's getting people more fully engaged. It takes close calls like this to really heighten that awareness that we've got to do something and we've got to do it now.
Yeah.
And the Flathead Basin Commission has been working tirelessly to try to ensure that the basin is protected. But we've also realized that what we do in the national park, what we do within the basin is important. But what's really important is ensuring that our boundaries, the boundary between Montana and Alberta and British Columbia, our boundary with other states, that we're really having a high level of presence at those check stations, border check stations, to ensure that we keep boats out.
Now, let's touch on that for a second if we could, because Idaho has had in place very thorough check stations at its major borders for quite a few years now, has intercepted many boats, including a number that were bound for Montana. Is it correct that Montana still does not have that kind of system in place?
Idaho is setting a very high standard. And it includes not just great things happening at the border, but those interactions with fellow states and ensuring that the communication across the boundaries there is occurring. This is something that's not just the job of one state agency. It's really the job of, think about all the presence that we have of federal and state government. It's got to be coordinated, and Idaho has taken that to a very high level, and I can't help but think that Montana can ratchet up the program. I know they're working on it and working real hard on trying to get this very tight level of communication with all the people that rightfully ought to be involved in the control program.
Well, feel free to decline this out of diplomatic concerns, but if you were to respectfully offer some suggestions to Montana about a key step or two that could be taken to strengthen our system, what would it be?
I always like to think in terms of what we need to do within the basin. That is the sphere of influence that the Flathead Basin Commission has. And so I think it gets back to that same thing about a relationship issue. What is the relationship between the Flathead Basin Commission and the state agencies that have that primary responsibility? And again, I'm optimistic, but I'm also concerned because this is something that we've got to get our act together. We don't really have time to take to implement these programs. We've got to get things going on the ground right now. I keep getting back to, I float from being the chair of the Flathead Basin Commission, which has a primary role. Then we get back to the park level, and the question is, what do we do if we get a positive hit, let's say within the state? What do we do if we have a positive water quality test somewhere in the state? And really getting our own act together within the park, so that what do we do if we have a boat put on the water, or if we have this positive water quality test? What are our emergency response procedures? And I think we need to set a high standard, and we need to work on helping the state, helping the local entities, because there is a role for local government and local citizens to play. But I like to concentrate on what my own sphere of influence is. And Idaho's setting a high standard. We're trying to set a high standard in the state, and we just need to work together.
Yeah. I mean, these tiny little critters, it helps to have multiple layers of protection, doesn't it? Some redundancy.
Well, it does. And when you think of positive water quality tests, what are the chances that where you're taking your test out of is going to contain them or not? We got to do that kind of work, but it's a shot in the dark. The getting boats before they put on our rivers and lakes, that's key. But right now we're really in an education phase of this, beyond the stricter kind of law enforcement trying to keep them out. It's going to take both.
Well, it is a tremendous issue. And, you know, one of the things that, of course, is related to that is the traffic going to the park. And maybe we can touch on that just a bit. How many cars go to Glacier National Park every year? Maybe you don't have a statistic, but it's a lot, isn't it?
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And, you know, notably, we are in the downhill run of completing the rehabilitation work on the Going to the Sun Road. I think we just passed the $140 million mark. So the years of working on this road and getting it back in good shape are almost over. And we're seeing some amazing changes in use of that corridor over time. So in this environment of getting out of road construction, we're really thinking, how do we want to manage the Going to the Sun Road corridor, the primary portal of access, into the coming 10 or 20 years? And I think the sense that we have in the park, and a strong sense that the public has, is that we're doing some things really well, but we're also struggling with some issues that just don't go away. Parking. Parking has become a huge issue. You can circle the parking lot up on Logan Pass for upwards of 45 minutes or even an hour. Congestion at Avalanche is, we've got cars parking a half mile or more north of Avalanche. And I think there's that sense that we can do better than that. Issues related to our shuttle system. And our shuttle system, the intention was to reduce congestion on the mountain during construction. The unintended consequences are we're pulsing thousands of more people up on the pass throughout the summer. We love our shuttle system. The public loves it. It's a great way to get into the backcountry and get out of your car. But one of the questions, or one of our goals when we implemented the system, was not just reducing congestion, but we even set a target of 5% of the cars. And although we don't have firm figures, our guess is that it's well under 1%. Then there's issues related to shuttle systems cost money. How do we continue to fund that over time? What is the role of a transit system? What are our goals for reducing congestion? So this Going to the Sun Road Corridor Management Plan that we're going to be embarking on next year, likely a 3-year plan, will look at that future of the transit system. what are we going to do? Or is it the same as what we're doing now? Is it different? How are we going to manage our facilities up and down the road corridor? And how are we going to provide a better quality visitor experience, especially at Avalanche and Logan?
Right.
And how are we going to ensure that we're protecting resources? Because what we've noticed is it's not just the quality of the visitor experience. Use levels across the pass have gone up exponentially. Much more multiple trailing, people not just sticking to trails, use levels on trails like the High Line just skyrocketing. You know, how can we do better? How can we provide that quality visitor experience and not impact resources? So this is going to be, I'd say, a comprehensive look, but focusing on that corridor. And it's a big deal, and we need the public to be involved in that.
So it's just part of this general challenge that the park faces of facilitating people loving the park, but preventing them from loving it to death.
You know, we want to do both, and you got to continually calibrate. Is what you're doing good? And I don't think anybody would disagree with, can we do better? I interact with a lot of local public that they were pretty pleased with the arrival of Labor Day, because it's gotten to the point where coming in the middle of the summer is just a little bit too busy for them.
Yep.
So that trying to do both, it's a real challenge, but I think we can do better than what we're doing now.
Okay. Well, we're a little past our halfway point, but we'll take a quick break here and come back and continue our conversation. To our viewers, please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We're continuing our conversation today, our second conversation, I'm pleased to say, with Superintendent Chaz Cartwright of Glacier National Park. Chaz, thanks again for taking the time to be with us. Before the break, we were talking a bit about the transportation challenges facing the park, the crush of car traffic. Anybody who's been up at the park, especially in the middle of the summer, knows that issue. And the park instituted a shuttle system a few years back. You expected a 5% reduction in car traffic resulting from people riding the shuttles instead of driving their own cars.
Our goal was 5%.
The goal was 5%. And what happened?
And we know it's well less than that. And I guess thinking this thing all the way through, there's some very distinct advantages of the shuttle system. But think about Logan Pass parking lot.
No.
As full as it's ever been. And we have buses that each day are dumping thousands of people up there. So not a surprise that use levels across the pass are increasing exponentially. So there's always pluses, but sometimes unintended consequences. I think the question really is, what is the future role of a shuttle system that would be a positive thing, that would accomplish goals and provide that ability of people to get out of their car and really get up on that landscape, not in their own personal car. And yet we're fully realizing too that the going to the sun road and driving your car there's this history of use. So we're not talking about not having that anymore. The reality of could you have a shuttle system that serves all people? I would say that would be near impossible. We have approximately 36 buses right now that are serving, let's just guess, less than 1%. Think of the fleet that we would need. So it's not possible to take everybody out, but how can it be to the advantage of the park, of the public, to have a shuttle system? Then the challenge of funding it. Right now we're funding the system out of our entrance fees. We're taking $7.50 out of every $25 entrance fee. And right now we're struggling to keep that shuttle system open and operating 2 months a year, from the 4th of July to Labor Day.
Wow.
So financial sustainability, how do we keep this thing going over time?
Yeah. And, you know, I worked for a number of years with a citizens organization in this area dealing with transportation issues and Highway 93. And one of the concerns we had was the need for a regional plan with transportation. And that back at that time, this is in the 90s, Glacier was already thinking about these shuttle systems, trying to get this stuff going, dealing with the problem of this ever-increasing crush of individual car traffic right over the middle of the park. And one of the issues we raised, the concerns that federal and state people didn't seem to be taking into their plans, is if the park is trying to manage that, and at the same time, the feds and state are building expanding highways leading to the park from every direction, from 2 lanes to 4 or 5 lanes, isn't that at cross purposes?
Well, our shuttle system is a joint effort. We were lucky enough to secure funding through our Going to the Sun Road project to do the infrastructure related to, you know, the facilities up and down that corridor. But it's a partnership with the state and especially with Eagle Transit. Eagle Transit is running our system, and it takes those partnerships to make these things happen. The great aspect of transportation is that everybody wants it, and it really does help, especially just look at transit in the Flathead Valley. It's a very positive thing for the people that live here, but all transit systems are incredibly expensive. I know of none that pay for themselves. So you take our system, which is a 2-month-a-year system, you know, that's from a starting point, that's a tough point to take off from. We need to answer this long-term financial sustainability. Struggling to keep things open 2 months a year, we need to really think in terms of how can we keep this thing on the landscape and pay for it. Pay for not just day-to-day operations, but pay for repairs and also have the money to replace buses on a regular basis.
So possibly a little few coins you have to throw in the meter when you get on the bus?
You know, I think it makes sense for people that use the system to pay for the system. Right now, everybody that comes to the park that pays those 4 different kinds of entrance fees pays for the service. But I would think that when we're looking at options for financial sustainability, it might include continuing to take that $7.50 plus supplement that with people that use the system pay some nominal fee. I think that's likely, but we'll see.
And I mean, could things get to the point where you need to limit the number of cars going over the road in a given hour or day or half day or something like that?
You know, I think that we need to look at all options. Again, looking at trying to do better than what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Everything is on the table. I would love a system where coming into the park is free and using the transit system is fee, but then there's the reality. It's tough times economically. And so we're trying to manage within our budget for the shuttle system, within our budget for the park, and we need to figure out what we can do with the resources that are available.
Yeah. Well, as long as one of the things that's not on the table is going the Sun Road into an interstate, going over the top of the park.
I promise.
Okay, good. You can relax, viewers. Thanks. So what about the overall budget issues with the park? I imagine it's kind of a challenging time that way as well, isn't it?
I think it is. We have a $14 million base budget, and it's like anybody else in their experience with their own budget at home, trying to make those dollars stretch and take care of priorities. We have plans to try to deal with reductions, and so we don't want to just react to that. But trying to make the most of the budget you have, we actually are taking our two primary fundraising partners, our bookstores that run all the bookstores, not just in the park, but also outside the park, and our primary fundraiser, and we're combining them. And the hope is that we can bring more financial assistance from the nonprofit side of things to help us get the job done. So I would never sit here and complain about our budget. I don't know what Congress is or isn't going to do. It's up to us to be prepared for if there are cuts, how are we going to manage them? And right now it's a big unknown, but good planning is always the best approach to what are pretty daunting times.
Sure. And we have just a couple minutes left, I'm sorry to say, but what about the challenge facing the park on a regional basis? Is the park part of some conversations that deal with the Northern Rockies as a whole and trying to keep that ecosystem healthy?
We have a major effort right now that tears off of the transboundary agreement that the governor of Montana and the premier of BC did. It's a new large landscape concept, the Great Northern Landscape Conservation Cooperative. These are my bosses, the Department of Interior, that have become part of the conversations in looking at long-term preservation and planning for that long-term preservation. Something that we talked about earlier in the conversation, but looking at this greater landscape, greater than even the crown of the continent, for how we can keep this system intact. Wildlife don't know these boundaries, and keeping that wildness at Glacier and keeping the wildness within the crown is going to take that constant interaction with scientists and managers. And that we've just scratched the surface in terms of moving forward on that. But that's the biggest opportunity that we have right now, is more cooperative management across boundaries.
Well, that's a good note to end our conversation on, although I'm sorry to say we're out of time. But
I am too. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for watching. We hope you'll watch again next time. So long.